So I'm a theatre director and theatre artist, but I also lead a programme of work for older people at the Royal Exchange Theatre. So that's what I'm going to talk about mostly today, including examples of what we do and the impact it has on people. And as part of that, I thought it might be useful to provide a bit of context about my practice as an individual and then talk about my work at the theatre building and theatre company where I'm based. So I direct new work, including musicals, and I quite often work with professionals and non-professionals together. So in this production, we had a young company of non-professionals, 15 and 5 professional actors. Because the young company couldn't perform every night, we had 3 teams. So sometimes I'd be running the rehearsal room with 45 people in it. So the work that I do with young people, but also with the elders company, and some of the work we'll do later, is about preparing people to work in that professional way, but making them feel safe to do that and get out of their comfort zone. This is a production I made for very young audiences, about a reindeer who gets into jazz music. So I work a lot with actor musicians. I also work in non-theatre settings. So the project on the left is a recreation project of a military hospital that existed during the First World War. And at the top is the original archive picture. And at the bottom is the actors who recreated that. And they did that every day for 2 years for visitors. So they popped up scenes of action. So they were professional actors, but working in a very non-traditional theatre setting. The project on the right was a UK-wide project led by an artist, a very prestigious artist called Jeremy Deller. But I was an associate director, so I was leading the work in the northwest of England. And I was responsible for 300 non-professional performers. So the project was to commemorate the Battle of the Somme during First World War, and on the 100-year anniversary, across the UK, hundreds of men in military uniform appeared on the streets of the UK in not in historic settings, in very modern settings, shopping centres, railway stations, and they created steel tableau, and then they moved off and they walked and they travelled on trains and buses. So the rehearsal for them was about developing their confidence, but also a very specific performance language that fulfilled the artist's vision of how they would behave. So, and then there's my work with older people. So I direct the Elders Company at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, and this is the current company. So I'll just tell you a little bit about our theatre. So that is the theatre space, and it's in the middle of what used to be the world's biggest cotton exchange. And in the 70s, a group of artists took over the building and created the theatre. If you come to Manchester ever, you must come and see it because it's beautiful. So the theatre itself is a 7-sided glass structure, and the performance action happens in the centre, and there are 750 seats. And no one is ever more than 9 metres from the centre of the stage, so it's a very intimate experience. As a theatre company, we produce all of our own work. So that's about 14 professional productions a year. And we coordinate the Bruntwood Prize, which is a playwriting prize. And we also have our resident companies, the Elders Company and the Young Company for non-professionals. So this is a production of King Lear that was also then transferred to the BBC iPlayer. So we reached a bigger audience than just our live audience. And our non-professional work sits within that programme and is taken very seriously by the organisation. Just want to give you a little bit of context about Manchester. So the city of Manchester has about 500,000 people, and we're within Greater Manchester, which has about 3 million people. And we're an age-friendly city. So that means that at a government level, a local government level, they think about making sure all services, so housing, transport, social care, healthcare, are age inclusive. And very importantly, alongside those strands and with equal importance, culture is part of that. So we work with our partners in housing and in other cultural institutions to deliver this work. So what we do, the programme that we offer, is very separate to a volunteer programme, and it's about us seeing so traditionally we have an older audience, but we wanted to start working with older people as artists and creatives and makers and not just consumers of our art. And a key priority for us, which fits in with the more strategic priorities of the council, is about challenging the negative stereotypes around ageing. So what we do is we have a public programme which anyone over 60 can get involved in, but we also have a company which is a core group of about 25 individuals who have a deeper experience with us every year. So the public programme is called Elders Mondays. Maybe if you take one and pass them along. For 2 days a month, we offer a range of workshops in the building led by theatre professionals that people can join. And what we try and do is link all of those sessions to the repertoire. So we run playwriting and play reading workshops. And we also run what we call play workshops, which are very practical, playful sessions. And we'll explore those in a bit more detail later. So it's about connecting people to the building, creating a community of older artists, and also deepening their understanding of theatre. So when we had a production of, say, The Producers on at Christmas, the work we did in these sessions linked to that. So we read other plays about the Jewish experience, and the same with all of the productions that we have on. And people pay to attend, but we also, at Christmas, we fundraise through our audiences. So the actors at the end of the show will ask the audience to give money if they feel that the experience they've had is of value and want to give it to someone else who maybe can't afford it. So this Christmas we raised about £22,000, which I think when I looked it up was about 33 million won. And that is a fund that people can then apply to pay for course costs and travel costs. So hopefully financial barrier isn't a barrier to taking part. And we also, on that day, run a dementia cafe, which is a very informal group for people living with dementia and their carers. And it's supported by healthcare professionals. So we've got professionals there who can offer proper advice if it's needed. But we also train our staff and volunteers to be aware of dementia, and that's part of a national campaign called Dementia Friends. Every May there is a festival, an England-wide festival called Age of Creativity, that's about bringing together all the different age-friendly events, creative events that are happening. So during that month we host a whole day of activity, but particularly performances. So we bring people in, other groups into our space, and they perform. And what you would see on the video is some quite surprising things, I think. So older people doing circus skills, older people taking part in activities that we might not necessarily expect them to take part in. So that's our public programme. But then we also have a theatre company, an elders company, and they take part in weekly sessions throughout the year, looking at different aspects of theatre making. And what we try and do is really build them as a group, as an ensemble. And sometimes if a professional artist is developing a show, they might come to the Elders Company and run a workshop to try out ideas for their show. And sometimes a director in our main space, our professional space, might want to have a community company. So this is from a production of Our Town by Thornton Wilder. And this is a professional actor on the left, and Janice behind her is in our Elders Company. And I think their experience of working with me on a regular basis and with other theatre professionals gives them confidence to go into a professional room and maybe demystifies what a professional environment is like, so they feel that they have a right to be there and they've got something to bring. And then they also make their own work. And the sorts of work we've been making with them is not necessarily traditional kind of script-based theatre. Partly sometimes they struggle with learning huge volumes of text, but also their skill as performers is about being able to hold a space and be present in a space and be storytellers, rather than maybe playing very detailed characters. So this project was called We're in the Lounge, and it was for an audience of 6 people. And it was an exhibition of things curated from their homes that had stories behind them. And then the live element included 2 storytellers talking about the objects and telling stories to the audience that was there. And at the end of each performance, it included some movement work to music. So it was theatrical. It was more than just having a cup of tea with someone. And I think what audiences enjoy is the authenticity of the performers and their ability to connect truthfully to the audience. And then they also made a production at a bigger scale. And this was called Moments That Changed Our World. And it was about their own personal moments of change in their lives. But often their personal moments of change were connected to bigger social change in Britain. So one woman spoke about her involvement in gender equality movement. Another man spoke about his marriage to his male partner and how throughout his life he'd faced discrimination before he was legally allowed to marry. And to make this work, we worked with a professional theatre designer and lighting and sound design, and also audio-visual design. So there was a lot of projection in the production. And then our technical teams in the building also fully supported the work. So the experience for those taking part was they felt a real sense of belonging to the organisation, and the work was programmed and promoted alongside the rest of our professional programme. So one of the challenges we face is moving people through the programme and not getting stuck with the same group of people. So we've developed a graduate programme. So people are in the company for a year and then they can be in the graduate programme and still have a connection with us and get offered particular opportunities, but it allows us to bring new people into the programme. So in the graduate programme, some of them are leaders, so they help support our public days of activity and assist in workshops. But we also support them to make their own work, so with rehearsal space and a bit of creative support. So I might go into the rehearsals and help steer the work a little bit, but it's led by them. And so that work is less, it's more a work in progress, and it doesn't need huge amounts of support or big resource and production resource. We can kind of make those things happen relatively easily. And actually one of the pieces that they made last year is a kind of work in progress. There's an idea in that we might take forward into a bigger production that we might make with the elders company. Then we also have a programme called Champions, where they help us platform the work. So events in the UK, like conference events, they might go and present work, or they might help us lead taster workshops out in communities where we know we're not really reaching, and they will help us reach those communities. In Manchester, we have a festival of ageing, and the Champions supported a project, a spoken word project, where we had a group making poetry in the theatre, and then a group who weren't theatre goers, and it was very new to them, making poetry. And then the groups came together and we presented that work in our public space at the theatre. We also work intergenerationally, so because we have a permanent young company and elders company, we can bring the 2 companies together. So they take part in workshops, but they also make work together. So this is a performance they made in a community setting for an audience of people that we know don't really come to our theatre. And then these are two productions that we made. The one on the right is a show that we made for young children that toured libraries. And the show on the left is a very physical theatre show that they made with a dancer. And then the other kind of strand of the work is about thinking about ageing and maybe challenging ageism and getting everyone to think about how they feel about their own ageing process. So we might do that through debates or creative writing sessions. And we're also developing a series of postcards that will be provocations that will help us have wider conversations with not just older people, but with all generations about ageing. And in particular, what role artists and culture have to play in the ageing process. We produced a piece of print where we consulted with the people taking part in our programme about why they joined it and what they got out of taking part. And the things they told us were very active things and very that helped us shape the programme, because if someone's open to being curious or wanting a challenge, it lets us know that we can push people a little bit. And they also told us why they stay and what they get out of taking part. And so some of the things they get out of taking part are a sense of belonging and feeling part of something, improved health and well-being, and maybe we have a role to play in signposting people onto other cultural experiences, because as a cultural institution we kind of know and we're really plugged into what's going on. And then just to finish, I'm just going to tell you about a few other projects that aren't to do with our theatre but that are happening in the UK. So every region of the UK has an Arts and Ageing Festival. So in Scotland they have Luminate, Wales Gwanwyn, and in Ireland the BL Teen Festival. And it's a chance to platform this work and to showcase it and celebrate all the good work that's happening. And then this is a project called BED by an organisation called Enteleki Arts. And what they do is they put a non-professional performer into a hospital bed in a space where you wouldn't expect to see it, and they see what happens and how the public reacts, and the performer has stories to tell. And there was a version of this that actually toured to Japan last year. This is a project called Storybox Project by a company called Small Things, and it's tailored for people living with dementia. And it's a very sensory theatrical experience that happens in care homes. And finally, this is a company called Spare Tire, and this is a production called The Garden that tours theatre settings and non-theatre venues. And again, it's for people living with dementia. There's also a version that they've done for learning disabled people, and it's a very sensory experience using projection onto the audience's hands, sights and sounds and smells. And then this is an exhibition that's on at the moment at the Barbican Centre in London. And it's called Unclaimed. And they've taken a lot of academic research about ageing and they've turned it into an exhibition which is interactive and really invites visitors to really think about some of the challenges and assumptions around ageing. So this is an example of how the national conversation in the UK is changing, I think. And I think as artists, we have to be a little bit mindful that all of our work with older people doesn't become about ageing, because they're not interested in that and audiences aren't interested in that. So a lot of the theatre we've made doesn't really talk about age, but it's present because of the company that you've chosen to put together. But we can talk about age in other areas of the work, like with the postcards or with exhibitions like this. So just to finish this part of the afternoon, we've obviously done lots of learning and got things wrong. But I thought I'd just share some of the key learning from our organisation. So I think one key thing is thinking ahead about how to move people through the programme so you don't get stuck with a cohort of people that don't want to leave, and then you'll struggle to move them through the program. And I think one thing we've done, not necessarily on purpose, but it's sort of looking back, I've realised that we've kept changing the program, which means that participants and the people using the program don't get stuck in a certain way of thinking and get into a tradition. So it's then easier to change or to accept new ways of working. Obviously, we all need to evaluate the work that we're doing, but I think finding creative ways to do that so that that becomes an artistic project in itself is good. I think follow your instincts because they will probably be right, but also develop the program with the older people taking part. I think linking up with partners who are either arts organisations or non-arts organisations is really key in making the work successful. And finally, I think be ambitious with these programs and make it about the art and making really great art. So that's the end of the presentation. Maybe if people have questions, maybe we'll wait and